Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Well, the extended Nick Wright session, I do Nick about once a month, and we go for about an hour, and we talk about a variety of stuff. Yesterday, somebody came up to me and said, somebody I work with in my little beer company, hey, it's dry January. Would you be willing to have a beer with these advertisers? And I'm like, dry what? I've never heard of it.
Our talks are pretty soon going to be called Cocktails with Colin. You and I just have a drink from afar. Now, the difference is we don't have to say what time we're recording, but I'm on the East Coast. You're 3 hours earlier. It's barely drinking appropriate time where you are right now. You're kind of getting by based on it being an East Coast-based media environment. If this were pure West Coast, we would maybe be like, Colin, maybe you should consider dry January for your health. But otherwise, I think we're in good shape.
I already worked out today. I did a show. I'm home free, baby. Home free.
Oh, I got a buddy of mine put me in a group chat with a bunch of other people. And it's just like 7 guys that have to do 100 push-ups each every single day. So I just get texts from people I don't know. That's like 20 down, 25 down, 40 down. And I'll be honest, the peer pressure works. Find myself in the morning, I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just a mess. I might as well knock out 10 push-ups here, sitting, getting ready to go to work, do something. So yeah, something good.
You're not a workout guy, but you're thin.
Yeah, I think the medical terminology is skinny fat. I'm skinny, but I have the insides of a really, really unhealthy person. And so I just try to do a little better. I go on kicks on the Peloton, where for 6 months, I'll be super competitive and really good at the Peloton. But then after that, I won't. And I don't like going to the gym. I don't like working out in front of people because I'm not that strong. So I just do stuff in my own house, whatever.
Yeah, I lift weights for 50 minutes every day.
1-5 or 5-0?
5-0, all but Friday. Wow. I try to lift 4 to 6 days a week.
Wow, that's how you look as good as you do at your advanced age.
I like lifting weights. Whatever reason why I like lifting weights. So whatever.
Good for you, buddy. Yeah. Well, listen, I'll get there one day. Thus far, I haven't needed to.
One of the things I wrote this, I think, in my first book. 2 things make smart men stupid: beautiful women and sports. And I always think, so I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, where I was a Husky fan as a kid, but we didn't have teams that won a lot of championships. And ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be a sportscaster. So I was never a true fan as a kid. You know, people know I like the Huskies or USC, but I'm not really a true fan. I love creating content. And anybody that knows me, you know me, Jamie Horowitz, Charlie Dixon. I love to create content. That's my love of my life, beyond my kids and family. I love to create 7-minute rants, 8-minute rants, and I love the audience to rip them, enjoy them, whatever.
Yep.
And this Jim Harbaugh stuff is why I, as a moderately bright guy, have a great career. Is that Jim Harbaugh has literally won everywhere. He got to a Super Bowl with Kaepernick. He won at academically rigid Stanford, like 12 games. He won 10 games at Michigan the first year with Brady Hoax players in the Big Ten. And for years, people just kept pushing back. He's not good. And I tell people, it's called Google. It's a search engine. You can look at his brother's brilliant. His dad won a championship. His brother's brilliant. He's won everywhere. And it was the reluctance for people because Jim makes people, he's a disruptor, uncomfortable. He's Ubered a taxi. He just pisses people off. He's new. We've done it this way. He does it that way. The Jim Schwartz pat in the back. He's hard. He pissed Pete Carroll off. And the idea that Jim Harbaugh needed the Natty to be viewed as a great coach. And I'm like, Saban bombed in the NFL. Spurrier bombed. Like there's 4 or 5 guys ever, Jimmy Johnson, Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh, that won with both. It's really hard. I mean, Belichick, he wouldn't deal with donors. He wouldn't recruit. He's shown no ability to understand offense. that in our business, that if we allow the fans to be the jury, and then, somebody can be the DA, somebody can be the prosecuting attorney, and you and I are just the judge, and you remove emotion from most of the arguments, it is rather bizarre.
Simple. Well, yeah,
that
for sure.
How often greatness is obvious and people, because their agendas or their connections to other schools, just won't subscribe to, Jim Harbaugh's won everywhere immediately.
Everywhere.
I am shocked by all the people that are like,
that needed this to prove it. They needed it to prove it. Now, listen, I will admit, it's not like we don't all have our own whiffs. I just mentioned the Jokic thing. So, it's not like anybody bats 1,000 on this stuff. But
no, I'm not saying that. Jokic, by the way, was an ascending player who's a second rounder.
And it just, there was no precedent for it, which is part of what makes him so special when you're unprecedented. And also to add to your point, and I might be totally misremembering, but like a decade ago, didn't you have a really weird thing with Harbaugh?
Yes.
I don't know if that was it. Right. But there was an interview or whatever where it seemed like he was giving you the hard time. I don't remember the details of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I did an interview. It was terribly clunky. I could have easily turned on him. But
that's what that's why I was going to bring it up. Was I thought somewhere in my brain, I thought that existed, but I couldn't quite remember it. Nothing would have been easier than to be like, everybody thinks this guy's a dope. He kind of was a dick to me when I talked to him. And it's always the safer bet to say someone sucks because it's hard to win. Because you're going to get to be right so much more often than you're going to ever be wrong, because there's only one winner at the end of the day. And if you can be like, well, can't win the big game. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? Like I told you, the guys, it sucks. And I watch 10% as much college football as you, but I watch the biggest games, the biggest programs, and I obviously am very aware of what's going on. And it was like 6 years ago. I'm like, wasn't Harbaugh's team with way less talent like a bad spot away from beating Ohio State?
Yeah.
Hasn't so much of this narrative of, can't beat the best teams. Like, aren't we basing that partially on a spot we all agree was the wrong spot in a year he would have either been undefeated or in the title game? I don't remember all the details, but there's just so much data. I'll give you a different contemporary example. It should not have taken Patrick Mahomes for people to realize Andy Reid, pretty fucking smart.
Yeah.
You know what? And by the way, he would have probably never won a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? If it would have just been Alex Smith to the next guy, because winning Super Bowls are hard. But when every player, every quarterback that you have has their best seasons under you.
Yes.
And then it's like, and I think, by the way, kind of a future take, I can see some of the media turning on is too strong, but starting to do this topic. How good is Kyle Shanahan really? If they don't make, because it's like, these great regular seasons, but where's the jewelry? Like if they don't win the Super Bowl, as opposed to being like, well, I don't know. He's taking quarterbacks that the moment they leave him are backups or benched or whatever, and won 12 games, 13 games, won playoff games, probably pretty good. And so I do think there is a level of folks that I think will only go with what they truly believe
and see.
Yeah, up until it's like, this is not in the mainstream enough anymore. I'll just agree with everybody else. And I think that's why, not to bring up the Niners again, I think that's why people have gotten so frustrated with me on Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
It's because so many of the other skeptics laid down their swords, and I don't think they were convinced. I just think they got sick of getting yelled at. And what I think folks don't know is, in order to yell at me, you better see me in person. because I'm not seeing any of it. I'm not reading any of it. Like, the only people who get to yell at me are Broussard, Wilds, you, and people I know. So, like, it doesn't impact me. And so the Harbaugh thing is fascinating. And I do wonder how much of it is they just didn't like it. They just thought the guy was weird and a jerk or whatever. And I don't want to ascribe that to him because I don't know him, but it seemed like a lot of it was like, I don't like this guy.
Yeah, I had 4. I rely a lot because I'm older. So I know a lot of coaches and executives. I go to lunch with them. I have dinner with them. So I know 4 different coaches who have been on Harbaugh's staff. And they all said the same thing. Guy is different. He's the most football obsessed guy ever. It's insane. So a lot of times I have access, you do, that fans don't, right? They don't.
Sure.
They don't have these. I mean, I go to dinner probably twice a year with Mangini. We talk about shit that I'm not putting on the air. Jed Fish is a good friend of mine. Different guys I've dealt with. So I do have some, I can call
part of the job. Yeah, of course.
Right, this is what we do. If you're a mortgage broker listening to me, you have access to stuff that I don't have. So, but I just found the Harbaugh stuff. It's like, guys, 4 times, including the NFL. First year, he took the Niners over. They were excellent. And it's like, a lot of people get jobs and they don't last. But if you get 4 different jobs, 5 different jobs, you take crap and you make it good immediately, and you're successful in all of them. I don't need championships. Now,
and where was he before Stanford? I don't even remember. I shouldn't say that.
So he was at San Diego. It was a small university. Where it was.
Yeah. And he succeeded there, and he succeeded everywhere.
They had a quarterback who was good. He made him really, really good. Then he went to Stanford. Stanford was the worst program in the country with high academic standards.
And they beat USC.
As a 40-point dog in the Coliseum.
I remember that vividly. I remember it. And in my opinion, set the table. And this is the other thing that happens sometimes to guys. Are you pals with Chris Peterson? Maybe I'm making.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I have him on the phone. Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like sometimes guys become victims of their own success.
Yeah.
Where they make a play so relevant or good that it stays that after they leave. And then to some folks, it's not as wildly impressive of what they did when they got there. So Chris Peterson turned Boise State into such a power that after he leaves, it's still relevant. And it's like, no. That was created by him. Similar thing happened with Harbaugh with Stanford. Harbaugh can leave. They have Andrew Luck and David Shaw, and they're really good still. And it's like, oh yeah, Stanford's always pretty good. It's like, no, it was not.
Terrible.
That is I understand there were times when it was, and they were involved in famous games, obviously. But when he took it over, it was terrible and made it great. And the Niners were in the wilderness, and it instantly turned around. It instantly turned around for them. Which, if you were advising him, what job would you if he had his pick of all the NFL openings, what job would you tell him?
I would say, Jim, you recruited Drake May. Do you think he's better than Justin Herbert? And if the answer is yes, you take the Washington job, because Herbert for the next rest of his career is expensive. If you believe that Drake May is better than Justin Herbert, you take the Washington job. Your brother coaches Baltimore. You take Washington. Your mom and dad can move between the two of you.
That's pretty
cap
cool.
Space, good roster, Drake May. Now,
rich owner.
If you don't think it is, then just go with the best quarterback. The answer in the NFL is almost always go where the best quarterback is or draft the best quarterback. Chicago, draft Caleb Williams. It'll just work out. It'll work out.
Of course.
Right. So the Charger job, unless wherever Harbaugh goes, what's really an advantage is like Pete Carroll or Jimmy Johnson. When they're in college and they come to pro, you get about a 3-year window where you know all the college players. You recruited all of them.
Oh, that's a good point.
Huge edge. So the rebuild will be much easier for you. Now, the Chargers is not a rebuild. They have cap space, cap issues. Washington's not a total rebuild, but a semi-rebuild with tons of cap space. So Harbaugh can walk in and go, yeah, I'm going to, like Jimmy and Pete, the rebuild is much easier for me. I know all. And by the way, we will trade off some players, get draft picks. I'll probably take 4 of my Michigan guys who I know can play, and I'll avoid the ones that I know
that I know
can't.
can't. Yeah.
So, I mean, you go look at Pete Carroll's first 3 or 4 drafts out of USC. I mean, it was just 5th round, 6th round. I mean, he was nailing people. Jimmy Johnson walks into the league. He is just a fish in a barrel. I think very interesting. No cap issues, marginal rebuild. You look around that division and you're like, Jalen Hurts, Dak, Daniel Jones.
Well, so can we, I'm not trying to hijack your podcast, but can we talk about Philly for a second? The Eagles.
Oh, you're not hijacking it. Philadelphia. So much I love about them, but I have a feeling Nick Sirianni is closer to the opening press conference than the Super Bowl.
Okay. So here's the thing there. So Wilds did an interesting thing on the TV show, which was he made the point that if the Patriots fired Bill Belichick and then surveyed this was before Vrabel got fired, and surveyed the landscape, they're like, okay, who's the best coach available? They'd land on Bill Belichick. The idea, you know what I mean? He said it was the same thing as the moment the Raiders cut Derek Carr. They're like, okay, we need a quarterback. Who should we sign? That someone would come to him and be like, well, here's this guy, and it'd be Derek Carr. That the guy you're getting rid of is the best available. So the opposite of that thought exercise is this. It's about to be, what, half a dozen jobs open? If Nick Sirianni were fired, would anyone hire him to be their head coach? If the answer to that is no, then you have to ask yourself, should he be ours? And I know that sounds harsh, and I know that sounds too much, but I would remind people, in Philadelphia, Andy Reid, 14 years, 5 conference championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, 9 playoff appearances, 8 double-digit win seasons, 1 bad year gone.
With B and C quarterbacks, yes, mostly.
1 bad year gone. Replaced by Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly, 10-6. The next year, didn't make it to the end of year 3 after back-to-back 10-win seasons. Doug Peterson wins a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. The next year, wins a playoff game with a backup quarterback. The next year, makes the playoffs. The next year, a bad season, gone. So this idea that Sirianni's untouchable, Gary Kubiak, I looked it up today, was 46-18 with the Broncos. Went to the division round 4 times, went to a Super Bowl, and they fired him. They were like, you know what? You're out of here. So if the Eagles lose 6 of 7 down the stretch, and the losses are the Niners by 1 million, win that game, I'm going to go through it because think about it. That Niners game, the Niners had 3 losses, the Eagles had 1. That would have locked up the 1 seed with 6 weeks to go. You'd be 4 games up with 5 games left. You know what I mean? The Niners would have then had 4 losses, and the tiebreaker would have been to you. They get blown out. Okay, that sucks. The next week, they could have locked up the NFC East against Dallas. They would have swept Dallas. Dallas would have 5 losses. They get blown out. The next week, Drew Lock has the only relevant moment of his NFL career, 92 yards to win the game. You then, escape against Tommy DeVito. Then Kyler drives the field on you, hanging 35. And then Tyrod Taylor is up 24-0 at halftime on your starters. If then you lose to Baker, oh boy, like it is rough. And there are real questions about what is this team right now, aside from a play that is likely going to be banned next year. What do you do well? And I don't know the answer.
Hey, look at, I can argue it's become Brandon Staley. At the end with Brandon Staley, he argued, hey, we're losing close games. We're not getting blown out. His quote.
Yeah.
Then they got blown out. And it's like, okay. So Sirianni's like, hey, these are go either way games. And then you fall behind 24-0 to the Giants. So not that it was a mutiny, but with Staley and Nick, by the way, you know who the Eagles were going to hire if not Nick Sirianni? They liked Staley. So they were looking for a young voice. And so when you start going from narrow losses, there's 2 or 3 things that I always think about. You go from narrow losses, okay, to ugly losses. And then you ask yourself, with the Chargers at the end, Herbert, before the injury, had regressed. Jalen Hurts has regressed. There is nothing the Chargers or the Eagles do well now. There's nothing.
Well, and So then the other problem is, it's like, well, let's not forget the year he just got last year out of Jalen Hurts. And then you ask yourself the really tough question of, you watch Indy this year? Because and you watch what Shane Steichen was able to cobble together with Gardner Minshew. I understand the last play of the last game didn't go well, but they were a yard away from maybe being in the playoffs with that Indy roster. And there's your big chess move was demoting your D coordinator and promoting Patricia, and now your defense is worse than it was. Your quarterback has regressed. You're not going to have more talent in the future. The best offensive line, 7 first-round draft picks on your defensive line, 2 stud receivers. So folks, I'll 8-mile myself here a bit. Folks think I don't like Sirianni because he told Chiefs fans to fuck off after they won that game.
Right.
That is not it. But that is a noteworthy moment.
Yeah.
Because it was the same way, I pointed out last year in the lead up to the postseason when they're blowing the Giants out in the playoff game and that little sky cam gets him and he does that mean mug, like shaking his head, yes. And then in the Super Bowl, when they're going to get a challenge gone their way and he's kind of histrionically showing, pointing one way and Jalen Hurts has to stop him like, hey, man, what are you doing? He felt to me like a bit of a front runner. Yeah. Like a guy that is really good when things are going good. And in his defense, it was like, well, we don't know how he's going to respond when things are going poorly because they've never gone poorly. Well, now they are, and it's going disastrously. So I think it's at least a question if Philly loses.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is bringing you, an offer that'll help you win money in the NFL playoffs. New customers, bet $5. That's it, $5. That's it, $5. Any game, and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Are you kidding me? I bet 5, that's it. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. It takes 90 seconds and put in Colin, C-O-L-I-N. Easy peasy. New customers, $5. That's all you have to bet. And get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on the DraftKings Sportsbook. The code is Colin, C-O-L-I-N. And the crown is yours. Well, here's another topic. First impressions matter. I've used the American Idol example a million times. I don't know anything about music other than I enjoy it. But I can listen. I can watch American Idol and say, that's a hack. That's a star. That's an employable lounge singer. And I know nothing about music. That Dan Campbell has sort of a blue-collar work ethos and a likability where the average fan who's busting his ass for a living is going to love him. He's really a guy a fan would like to have a beer with. Dan's opening press conference was embarrassing. Just novice, eat your kneecaps is bad. And he was 4-19 and 1 to start. And then, things start working out. I've said this before, the star of that franchise is not Goff or Dan Campbell or Ben Johnson. It's the front office. They've had back-to-back incredible drafts, great drafts. And so then he gets a bunch of good players and they start winning a wonky division where Aaron Rodgers leaves, the Bears are a tire fire, and Kirk Cousins is, sort of okay. And they win and they deserve credit for it. But now you're watching Dan Campbell and you're going, he's a little over his skis. He's a bit of a meathead. Sirianni had the worst press conference I've ever seen. Could not speak. Acknowledged it. Very turbulent, like Dan Campbell early. Steichen comes in, elevates the offense. He leaves. They stink. And in both instances, I ripped both. I said, Dan came off as sort of a very limited meathead. Yeah. And we've seen examples that he's sort of he's the overly aggressive guy. A little too
emotional. Emotional. Listen, he's emotional.
He's a fan.
Yeah.
And then Sirianni looks completely over his head. Is that first impressions do matter. You ever watch Sean McVay's first press conference? Obama wasn't that slick. I mean, it was like it was on a prompter. I was like, chest, face forward, looking at the camera. I mean, I literally thought, my God, I'd run through who is this like
Right. He
19
was
year
like
old?
32. Yeah.
I
He
was
was
just
super
like,
young.
holy hell. First impressions matter. McVay's first press conference knocks your sock off. And that I think that if you go back to Sirianni and Dan Campbell, there are qualities about both that are endearing. But man, if you can't get the opening presser right, I've said
It's
this
a real
before.
thing. Go ahead.
It's a nobody wants to say this, but it does matter. We elect people based on, are they telegenic? Are they good at the podium? If you can't get through 4.5 to 8 minutes on a podium, by the way, you've flown in, you've thought about it. You know there's going to be tough questions. You're preparing for
Well,
it.
so that last part I think is the most interesting, because I wonder if some of these guys would be better if if they didn't know it was that day, if it was off the cuff. Like Sirianni's thing to me, Campbell was a different story. Campbell was, this guy's a former player. I think players are gonna. I looked at that press conference and said, I totally get why motivationally he's going to be excellent, why players might relate to him. And that very moment, I said, and I get it. I'm a nerd. I didn't play. I understand. But in that moment, I was like, my guess is he's not going to be great at the situational football stuff. Now, he actually has been shockingly good at, he does follow the quote analytics, but it's just really what he's doing is he just wants to go for it every time. And the analytics support going for it. But and so I think it's almost by accident that he's following it because it's like super aggressive, go, go, go. But you saw the cartoonish end result of that when he went for that 2-point conversion from the 7-yard line, which is one of the worst decisions.
He was a fan.
Exactly. He was an angry fan that was like, this is bullshit. I got screwed. I'm going to show you. So that's different. Sirianni's thing was he seemed nervous. I bet Sirianni, if he had not been told there was a press conference coming, I think he was hurt by the fact he had thought about it all night. But that's a different type of concern. That means when things get tight, are you going to get tight? When that means, you know what I mean? When the pressure gets up, are you going to respond or not? So that was a different level of concern. So the reason I brought the whole Sirianni thing up was I have a different kind of galaxy brain question for you, which is this. If they lose to Tampa and they fire him, isn't that the perfect spot for Belichick? You have all that talent on defense. The offensive skill position guys are there. They're already there.
And your weakness is drafting. Howie Roseman's an expert at it.
Exactly right. And it's like, hey, you've got however limited Jalen Hurts might be, even if last year was an aberration, the best quarterback he will have had in a half decade. He will look at Jalen Hurts like he is Patrick Mahomes 2.0 when he's been dealing with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and the last, legs of Cam Newton. The offense is in place. The defense has all this blue chip talent up front. And Belichick's been getting the most out of secondary players and linebackers for 20 years. This Patriots defense doesn't have stars on it, and they're awesome. The stars are hurt, Judon and Gonzalez. And that is why, if I were Philly and I lose to Tampa, I wouldn't fire Sirianni to fire Sirianni. But I sure as shit would consider it if I got on good intel. Bill Belichick, he wants to stay in the Northeast.
Yeah.
He wants to go with the blue chip. People are like, maybe Atlanta. I'm like, Bill Belichick doesn't want to coach the Falcons, be in the set. He stay in a cold weather, northeastern city with a blue chip franchise, chance to break Shula's record, chance to get to the Super Bowl. That to me is a hand in glove fit that I would strongly consider if I were all parties.
So here's something. I live in beautiful Los Angeles. In fact, tonight I'm going to go out to dinner, be by the water, and amongst the glitterati, and you will be in cold, windy New York. Yeah. So we got into this discussion. I think I've done this a couple times. So New York's the biggest city in America. LA is 2, Chicago 3. And if you look at New York right now, with all the money, with all the influence, the biggest star in the city is Aaron Judge. Second is 40-year-old, increasingly weird Aaron Rodgers. and there is no third. There is no transcendent star. The Clippers have more star power than the city of New York. The Clippers. Forget
That's right.
LeBron, AD, the Rams, the coaches in LA.
Not even star coaches in New York.
There's like nobodies.
Yeah.
McVay, like him or not, Lincoln Riley, Harbaugh potentially. We've done this before. Stafford, Aaron Donald, Justin Herbert. That forget California, Los Angeles, Ohtani, Mookie Betts. That if you look at Los Angeles and all their pro franchises, we get to about 24 between like players, coaches, like star power.
A-listers.
New York has two. So
and one has played 4 snaps.
And I get to the point where I think to myself, okay, that's not a coincidence. I don't believe in that. Chicago, similarly, for the size of the cities, Zach LaVine, they have no stars. Is that increasing? I mean, literally, Chicago, a city.
I was thinking. I was like, the reason I stopped was I was thinking. I was like, yeah, the Bears the Bears have no stars.
A hockey
not
guy
a single
for the
star. The Cubs
Bulls.
and White Sox, like there's.
So
this is correct.
LA has 25 coaches or stars. And I think what's happening is something the rest of the country, if you watch cable news, nobody wants to live in LA. Rich people do. It's the land of opportunity. And that when people increasingly have options, professional athletes and coaches, many of the agents live here. The weather's better. Entertainment, production companies. When LeBron chose the Lakers, he did so because the 13th richest people in Los Angeles all wanted to meet him and talk about production deals. And that Los Angeles has literally separated from the company. We always talked about stars in LA. But if you're watching what's happening in New York and Chicago, I don't think it's just bad GMs. Is that professional athletes and their agents, this is something Canada has dealt with. Canada can't win the Stanley Cup. And The Athletic had a story a year ago about the various reasons. And of the 8 reasons, like number 7 was the right reason, is that stars would rather live in the United States. The weather's better. There's more money. We're a capitalistic country. That you'll just get paid more. You'll have a cuter girlfriend. You'll be on the beach in Florida. You'll be in Phoenix. You'll be in Los Angeles. You're 27-year-olds and you're rich. Is that people can say they hate LA, but Harbaugh's going to have all this choice. Chances are he's going to take Los Angeles.
I've never really, you do this to me sometimes, which is you bring up something that I haven't thought about before. So then I am forced to come up with a theory that admittedly I've thought of for 12 seconds. So this isn't one of those like, oh, I'm glad you mentioned this. I have a very well thought out opinion.
We can edit it. You can take it.
No, that's fine. No. Because as you were talking, as often happens, and this is I think it's a strength for me professionally and a weakness personally. As you were talking, I was 35% listening to what you were saying and 65% figuring out what I was going to say. So I have a slightly different theory that I just came up with, but I think makes sense. I think in the past, one of the massive draws of New York was the city will make you a star. So you will deal with shit weather, abrasive media. I think tax rate stuff is a little overrated, but still.
But it's something.
It's something. It's not nothing. That, the fact that some people really want a house with a yard, and in order to get that here, you have to live, you deal with a real commute.
Westchester County.
Right. You've got to live a real commute away, all that stuff. But people were like, if you were a big time athlete, you're like, man, but nobody knows me, or I don't, my profile isn't big enough. If I go to New York, it will be. In modern society, it's not that it doesn't matter, but it barely matters. In modern society, because of the way media has changed and because of the way getting your own message out has changed and because everyone can be their own megaphone, you don't have to live here to get it out. So where people choose? Good weather, You know what I mean? Depending good
Softer, less
nightlife.
relentless media.
Exactly. And so it's not, when you brought up Rodgers, like Rodgers is the guy. Judge was drafted here, obviously.
Yeah.
The Rodgers opted, chose the Jets. A couple things. One is the whole league wasn't after him. A handful of teams were. But if you spent 15 years in the exact opposite of New York, in a city with the worst weather of any American sports city, the weather's not going to bother you. And it might be a cool change of, oh my God, there was nothing but a bowling alley as far as nightlife where I was. Now I have all these options. I'm going to go there. But for when you don't have to be LeBron. If you are like a star quarterback in the NFL, yes, there is something to being the quarterback for the Giants. I understand that. But would Lamar Jackson be way more famous as a Jet than a Raven? No, he wouldn't. Could Patrick Mahomes, who lives in Kansas City, Missouri, is it possible for him to be that much more famous? I don't know. His tight end is dating the most famous woman in the world. And and I'm sure they really love each other, but the reason that he was, in the same room as her was because of his proximity to the fame and his own fame in Kansas City. It's just changed. It's changed to where you don't have to be in, one of these places. And so then why does LA do well? LA does well because it's god dog beautiful. It's awesome to live there if you're rich.
You can hide. Manhattan's an island, right? Los Angeles, you do not see Matt Stafford in Los Angeles. You never see Jared Goff. People in Los Angeles, for those the uninitiated, if you live in Manhattan Beach, you don't live. If you live in Manhattan Beach, you don't leave. If you live in Malibu, you don't leave.
Buddy, I watched Chiefs-Packers at Lil Wayne's house.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the neighborhood he lives in. It was a 40-minute drive from the Fox lot in a neighborhood that I hadn't heard of. I drove in there and I'm like, it must just it's a place I'd never heard of within, tossing distance of downtown LA, and it's nothing but bazillionaire houses. But it's like hidden. It's like you take a left turn and like, what the hell? That doesn't. So that is the other thing. Yes, you're right about LA. There's all these different little enclaves.
You can hide in LA,
and you can live. And so there is. But if that's not your type of thing, and you're just like, you know what, I am going to. Did Kevin Durant become less of a star when he went from New York City to Phoenix? No. But in the past, he might have. And so it just, one of the biggest draws I think New York City had for athletes isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not there anymore.
And I also think you point to something. And this was sort of an aside, but it is impactful. First, what you're saying is right. But the smaller thing is, to be in New York, you had to deal with a bunch of shit to be a star. And you don't in Los Angeles. The media is soft. The weather's better. We don't have a city tax like New York. And the truth is, it's a spread out town where you can hide. I mean, I'm not joking when I say this. I live in an area of town that has a lot of pro athletes. Like I'll see somebody tonight. There's pro athletes everywhere. There's not a lot of Hollywood people, but I know somebody that lives in an area. I used to live in Santa Monica, and at my pharmacy, I would see like 6 stars. Nobody cares. It's not sort of Los Angeles, the industry is stardom. So the people on the street don't bother stars. Hey, autograph. It doesn't happen here. They just let them be. It's the best place in North America to be a star.
Well, it's also, if you're
to give them space.
And there's the last point I'll make on it. If you're a sports fan, if you're an athlete, there's probably something to be said to playing in a non-diehard city.
Yes.
The people at the games are going to be diehards. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, well, now no one's showing up to our games. You play in a big city. The stuff's going to be sold out. But people are not as obsessed.
Strident.
Yeah, and so like there is, if you're in a diehard city, which is typically a northeastern city or a city like where I'm from, Kansas City, Kansas City is a little different because we have no celebrities at all except for the athletes. So typically people almost leave the athletes alone because it's like we just want them to be happy. You know what I mean? Like and it's such a it's a medium-sized city, but feels like a small town. So Kansas City is a little different. But if you in LA, the other good thing about being an athlete in LA is you might go to the store and people might just not give a shit. Like, it's not even the team I root for. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're LeBron, it's one thing. You know what I mean? But I would imagine that, let me think of a good example here. I would imagine that Russell Westbrook can go to the store sometimes.
Yeah.
And people don't, people for the most part, you know what I mean? I don't want to say leave them alone, but don't freak out the way they would in Philly.
Damon Stoudemire.
Maxey was somewhere. Yeah.
When he was in Portland, he was from Portland and loved it. He said, I love Toronto. He said they had a hockey team, a CFL team, an NBA team, a baseball team. Damon said, I'm not 7 foot. I have a pair of glasses and a baseball cap on. I could hide. And in Los Angeles, I've always said there are rungs of famous. There are The Rock, right? But there's Denzel. And then there's LeBron. And then there is, kind of B stars, soap opera, Vin Diesel-y. And then there's, like young music stars. I mean, I'm like the 37th rung of famous in LA.
That's what I was going to say is, and I'm not you, but you and I, if we're in a similar tier of notoriety, I would argue it's kind of the best level of fame.
Yes.
Which is occasionally you get it's like a free meal. You know what I mean? They're like, it's like, really? It's like, nope. Like occasionally that you get the natural ego boost of a couple times a day. If you're out and about, someone being like, hey, love your stuff. You know what I mean? That, but you can just be you're never bothered. You know what I mean? And so it's all the perks, none of the drawbacks. The actual famous people, the truly famous people who have to strategize how they're going to leave the house, that sounds miserable to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sounds like I would not enjoy that at all. But this, and so to your point, LA is one of the cities where you can be an actually famous athlete and not treated like one. Yeah. Unless you want to be, you know what I mean? Unless you're you know what I mean? You're opting into it. So I think that's probably super helpful. And the weather. So the weather's pretty good. It's a damn snowstorm right now.
Oh, you guys have a snowstorm?
Well, it's like an ice storm, something. I don't know. It doesn't really snow in New York anymore the last couple winters, but they think that tonight's going to be bad. I don't know. I got an email from my kid's school saying we're going to let you guys know at 5 a.m. if school's canceled tomorrow. I'm like, okay, great. Meanwhile, it's 74 degrees and sunny.
I want to see what the weather is. Hold on.
Yeah, that's great.
It is 64 degrees.
Oh, cold front for you.
And few clouds. I'm going to dinner by the beach. It's a good life.
Oh, speaking of weather, and then we can do whatever you want to do before we're done. No matter what anyone believes in the Chiefs this year, I understand I am on the furthest possible end of optimism about the Chiefs. I think whether I'm right or wrong, I think 90% of the world is going to join me by Monday because I think the Dolphins are going to look so bad in -15 wind chill. I really believe that. Their whole pass rushing unit is out injured. They have to feel like we went from being the 1 seed to on the road in Arrowhead on a streaming service, Saturday night short week in 0-degree weather, -15 wind chill, and we have Isaiah Pacheco just running through us. I think that the weather is going to honestly be enough to give the Chiefs a 10-point edge Saturday. And even if they're not as good as it looks, I think Saturday, Kansas City is going to look really good. and the Dolphins are going to look really cold. And I think that is going to be a huge factor in that football game.
I had a team that was, before the internet, that was very offensively ingenious was Air Coryell, Dan Fouts, John Jefferson, Kellen Winslow.
Sure.
There were these Charger teams that were kind of ahead of their time, never won titles, but they were kind of like pre-Bill Walsh, Joe Montana Niners. They were doing wild and zany, progressive offensive stuff. And they went to Cincinnati and played a playoff game, and it was 4. In San Diego, I mean, again, it's palm trees, and Fouts goes there. And I remember watching the game as a kid. I've never seen human being. They might as well have been naked. They looked so uncomfortable. And there is something to be said. I am now somebody who has lived for 8 years in California. And it is amazing. It's 52 here. It was the other night, it was windy on my birthday party. It was windy. I told Ann, I don't know what's happened. The climate change. This is just not even. And she goes, it's 52, honey. It's a slight wind. Like, it does affect. South Beach is the last place in America. I mean, it's really the best place in America during the winter.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea
pretty soon it's going to not exist, unfortunately. It's going to be underwater. But yeah, I mean, it is. No, I think that the weather is, and that's one of my favorite things about the NFL, is like there is this part of it that your most important games are played until the Super Bowl, of course. Sometimes there are these teams where it's like, yeah, I don't know how really good we are, but I know we can handle the cold. Yes. And so if you get us to, then this obviously has not been the Chiefs' story over the course of their, this era, but for Cleveland or like these teams where it's like, we might just Pittsburgh, we might just be okay, but we also might get to the postseason and know how to deal with what you might not know how to deal with. And it is such an odd thing to me about Buffalo, that Buffalo historically with this team has not played great in bad conditions.
And he's from Wyoming.
Right. And they should be the team that, knows how to play in these bad conditions the best.
Right.
But you have these teams that play in domes and in warm weather. Like, I haven't looked, but I'm very curious if Houston were to win against Cleveland, which I don't know if I think they will, what the weather's going to be like in Baltimore that first weekend. And is Houston just going to be like, oh, fuck this? Like, we didn't sign up for this. And so I'm very interested in how that affects all the outdoor cold weather games as the playoffs move on.
I had a very good gambling year. So I was 0-9-1 to start. From that point forward, 14 of 16 weeks, I was 500 or better. I was 64%. 63. That's a really good year. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable.
I had a great blazing fight. I had a guy come up to me yesterday in the grocery store. He's like, "Man, you were cooking this year. Let me buy you blankety blank." And I'm like, "I'm good. This is my job. Don't worry about it." And he goes, "Colin, I've been following you for a lot of years." He goes, you had a year about 10 years ago like this, which I remember. And I said,
well, the year 10 years ago, or whenever it was right before you came to Fox Sports, that was a year you might have been on the record the best handicapper in the country. That was a year where the Blazing Five would change lines a bit. That was a historic run. And then I didn't know. You know what's funny? And this is now I'm going to sound like a bitter man. This is the modern media. There was a lot of publicity about your first 2 weeks. Not nearly as much about the following 16. A lot. The Cowherd just hasn't hit a bet in 2 weeks. Just getting roasted.
Well, by the way,
meanwhile, just went 2-3 every fucking week. I had my worst year in forever. And it was just the same thing. 2-3, 3-2 every week. But go ahead.
Well, by the way, Harbaugh had a losing record in COVID. I had a shit COVID year. My takeaway was, folks, Sunday morning they'd be like, "Oh yeah, these 8 starters don't play." It's like that doesn't count. You gotta. But you know what's funny? When the media, and I don't care because I literally am not on my phone. Like, just not. Once Elon Musk took it over, I gave him about 2 months. It's a mess. I'm just not on it. I used it for promotion for my podcast, for the volume. I'm not on it. But it is interesting that the blogosphere, which claims shows like our clickbait, went over the moon on my
Over the
09-1
moon,
start.
buddy.
Nothing in 16 weeks of
No.
red hot. Nothing.
Yeah. No, but go ahead. Sorry. Well, of course. But I mean, that's
you
how
want to
it
hear
goes. But
you
go
want to
ahead.
hear my theory this year?
Yeah.
So what I did every weekend, and it didn't always work. Like this weekend, I said Justin Fields is not as good as Jordan Love, but Justin Fields with that atrocious Green Bay defense will look better than Love against a good defense. It didn't
That's
happen.
what I thought too. Yep.
Yeah. But what I really started to do by week 3, I said, you're overthinking the room. When you can get the best quarterback in value, just bet him. And I started just betting 4 of my 5 picks. I bet a lot of Kyler Murray. It's like I bet some Tyrod Taylor. I'm like, Tyrod Taylor against Philadelphia's defense? He's going to move the ball. He's averaging 360 yards against better defenses. And I really started coming down to almost like I picked divisions. Who will be the better quarterbacks in these games? And it's amazing how simple. Like, for instance, Texans Colts this weekend. Wise guys love the Colts. And I'm like, folks, it's a win you're in game. CJ Stroud's better. I would take CJ Stroud. I talked myself out of it because J-Mac and Millman are like, no. But in the end, I watched it and I went, first play of the game last drive. It was won by CJ Stroud.
Yeah, 100%. All right, last thing. I don't know and I might have said this to you on TV today. I don't remember. So I apologize if I'm in reruns. I said it to someone today. I don't know what the division. No, I didn't say this to you. What the divisional round matchups are going to be. I know what the best ones would be. The ideal outcomes are the Rams beating the Lions, because then you get the Rams playing the Niners, and that's a real scare for the Niners. Yes. That is a real legitimate scare.
Yep.
And I love CJ Stroud. I love that story. If we assume the Bills and Chiefs are going to win, which I think they both will, and that is a great round 2. Chiefs having to go to Buffalo for the first time. I am, as America's most noteworthy, Buffalo antagonist, I am rooting for the Bills. I want to see Chiefs-Bills in Buffalo. Let's get Mahomes Allen. So let's assume that's it. As much as I like CJ Stroud, I'm rooting for the Browns, because Browns-Ravens is another one. That is a shitty first game for Baltimore. It's like, wait a minute. We got to play the only quarterback in the conference with deep playoff experience other than Mahomes in a first game in a divisional matchup with that defense, and they're hot coming off a win. And then I don't really care who wins, Eagles, Bucs, because I think either team's drawing dead. But it's probably better if the Eagles win, you get Cowboys, Eagles. But Niners, Rams, Chiefs, Bills, Browns, Ravens would be an unbelievable divisional round weekend, as far as where you could make a credible case for any of those 6 teams in those matchups. And you could make a credible case for any of those teams making the Super Bowl. Like, I think the Rams can make the Super Bowl. I'm not picking them to make the Super Bowl, but I think that they've won 7 of 8, and the one loss is to Baltimore in overtime. I mean, that's with Sean McVay and Matt Stafford. Like, that's a real thing. And Cleveland's defense, Baltimore, I don't know. I'm super excited. So that's what I'm hoping happens. I don't know if it's what will happen. That's what I'm hoping happens.
So it's interesting. I mentioned you at the end of the show today. I said, Nick Wright, 2 weeks in a row, has said, you're going to bet the Rams over the Lions. And I'm like, no, contraire, Monfred, that's not going to happen. And today, I got my notepad out. Coach, quarterback, defense, Laporta's out. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I got to take the Rams.
You're going to take the Rams, certainly, plus the points. Certainly with the points.
Timeout. Dan Campbell, McVay. That's a 2.5 to 3 point advantage.
Yeah.
Rams.
Stafford
Goff. 2.5 to 3 points. You have to take the points with the Rams. You have to take the points.
You have to take the points with the Rams. I think the have to do is points with the Rams. I think that when the Chiefs did you see what the Chiefs line opened at? It was
2.5,
available,
didn't it?
1.5. And it was available for 90 seconds. and you know what I mean? Now 4 is a different story. Because you know what I mean? While I think the Dolphins might fold in the cold, the Chiefs haven't blown anybody out in forever. You know what I mean? Like that's not an obvious one. I think the next best bet is Tampa getting points at home. against an
So
Eagles team that's falling
I don't
apart.
think I think the Kansas City, listen, you're going to play poker when you're retired. I'm going to do a podcast a week with a volume and bet football. And so when you bet football professionally, I wouldn't be on the air. I would wait for the lines to come out and pounce on them. I would live in a state where I can gamble and I would just pounce. So, like there are the best lines of the week are always Sunday night, Monday. Those are the best lines always. And the sharps jump on them. And I've always said if I hit 63% from weeks, 3 to the end of the year, I'd hit 64 to 65% if I could bet them. If I did Blazing 5 on Monday, I would get, it wouldn't be dramatically different, but you would get like 6 to 7 games a year where you just get a team you like. Because I lost several games. I pushed on like 4 games that the line just was. And I say on the air Friday, this is not the best of the line, but I still like them. Yeah. But I will say is that these games are tough bets. I don't love any of them. I tend to think Philadelphia. I mean, I watched Baker last week. They were bad.
I mean, that's true. And he's hurt. I mean, they scored 9 points.
If you go look at this run, they got 2 wins over Carolina. Like that division
No, that's true.
Awful.
That's true. So then if you take that out, the next one that I think is
Kansas City hosting a warm weather team that is depleted I would go up to 4.5. I think Kansas City,
and Kansas 23. Kansas City healthy, which they are. Kansas City rested. It's one thing for this Chiefs team to not be the team that it was projected to be before the season, which is the Super Bowl favorite. It's another thing for them to fully healthy lose a home wild card game. You know what I mean? Like the reason the line concerns me is even if I'm right that Kansas City controls the game, once you lay 4, you're susceptible to being up 10 and that shitty backdoor cover at the end. You know what I mean? At the end that just guts you. I think the Cowboys are going to score 35 points on Green Bay.
I do too. The
question is, can Green Bay score 30?
That game feels like 33, 34 to 26. That's what it feels like.
Right. That the line is exactly right. That's the thing. Listen, the NFL in general, lines are never wrong. NFL playoffs, it's never like, oh my God, look at this bet. Like, no, I mean, that never is there. The only one is, I think the Rams are better than Detroit. I just flatly believe the Rams are better than Detroit.
Well, they certainly have components. Without Laporta, Laporta is the rare tight end. I mean, Travis Kelce has 16 touchdowns in 14 playoff games. It matters. He's better in the playoffs.
He also, Colin, is the NFL's all-time leader in playoff yards per game, not amongst tight ends, amongst everyone, amongst receivers with at least 10 games. He is the all-time leader in playoff yards per game. So, yeah, I mean, and Kelce hasn't been right all year, but I also think if you look at his snap count, if you look at things, the Chiefs have been, despite the fact that they've needed these games, they've blown some games, they have been, to my eye, a team that has been holding certain things. They have not broken the glass. They clearly have not yet felt we are in full emergency because Kelce hadn't played 90% of the snaps in any games. You've only seen Mahomes run a lot, and you saw it for the first time in the Bengals game, which was to lock up the division and be able to rest in Week 18. I still think Kansas City has a gear, just like you saw Buffalo here this last few months. All of a sudden, Josh Allen is running all the time. And you know why? Because they have to win. And it's like that is always their most dangerous play. Right. But they don't do it because it's dangerous for them. They can get the guy hurt no matter how big he is. I think I'm always leery of teams that I think might have an extra gear. I think Kansas City might have an extra gear, and I do. The Kansas City stat that jumps out to me are 2 of them. One is they are this year, they have 1 loss when they either tie, if they don't lose the turnover battle. And that 1 loss was the first game of the year, and their turnover, by the way, was a pick 6 the other way off a bobbled pass. Everybody talks about all these issues they have. The sneaky problem for Kansas City is top 5 most turnovers, bottom 5, fewest forced turnovers. They have the
Right.
3rd worst plus minus in football. Every other team in that bottom 10 is some shit team that is drafting early. Like, you can't overcome that. Typically the Chiefs have. So maybe that kills them. You know what I mean? Maybe in the playoffs they keep turning the ball over, that kills them. But if they don't lose. And do I trust them a little bit more come the playoffs? I do. And so I think Kansas City's super dangerous. And I think the Rams are super dangerous.
Yeah.
And if the Rams, man, if the Rams beat San Francisco, that then means Dallas doesn't have to leave home the whole playoffs.
Yeah.
And so, like, they are sneaky. I thought one of the most important moments of the weekend was San Francisco, or the Rams beating San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because that made the Rams the 60 instead of the 7. Because I think the Rams could have gone to Dallas and caused some real problems for the same reason they can go to Detroit and cause problems. So, I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, a very sneaky MVP is Matt Stafford. Not going to win it. He has been on fire for about 9 weeks. And I mean, arm
100%.
angles. I mean, he has been, it's amazing. One of the reasons the NFL is so great, a baseball draft or an NBA draft, you have to be patient. Puka Nacua has changed the receiving core. They got a left tackle who's great, 2 defensive linemen who have been excellent as rookies. It's like they got like 4 players who are impactful in the draft, and Stafford's healthy. And it's like, yeah, their roster's suddenly really interesting.
The Rams draft this year is the Chiefs draft last year. It's like, oh, you got 4 guys that are helping you right now.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, 4 guys that are right now making a difference. Not like, oh, they're going to be good. It's like, no, they are good right now. When that happens, it changes the math on your team. It significantly changes the math on your team.
Hi, folks. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports and comedy and concerts and theater, all those events near you. Killer last-minute deals at Game Time. All-in prices, views from the seat, best priced guaranteed, and that's the key. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets, which is the thing most people get anxious about. Game Time eliminates it. Easy to find tickets for every kind of event in your area. They're obsessed with saving you money and me money on tickets. That's what Game Time does. It's the place to find last-minute deals. Game Time guarantees mean you always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section at a certain row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Pretty cool. Download the Game Time app. Like all apps, it takes 90 seconds. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Colin, me, COLIN. $20 off your first purchase if you do it. Download the Game Time app. The code is Colin. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So I was thinking about you the other day that this is an interesting topic. You know how we both, I'm very much a windshield over a rear view. I just don't care about the old days. I just don't care. I was thinking about, I love the NBA, and this doesn't bother me, but I don't think it's great for their long-term viability or growth. Zion and Ja were going to be domestic stars. Both, due to immaturity, have fizzled. Now Ja's hurt, Zion's hurt. And I do think, you've done a little European travel, and my mom was European, and I've done a little bit. I do think their academies create more mature players at a younger age, higher skilled, more mature. They don't have an AAU circuit like us. They don't gas their players up. And I think it's very difficult. If I was 17, 18 and being told how great I was, it would affect me. And I watch the league now with Giannis and Jokic and Luka, and I mean, even to SGA is Canadian.
Yeah.
And I look at our domestic players, and I'm not questioning their commitment or their excellence. But Steve Kerr has said this repeatedly. AAU basketball is not great for the ascension of young people. It's not collaborative. It's just about you and people gravy training you. And I look at the NBA right now. It doesn't bother me because I love bigs that can shoot, handle. I love watching Jokic play. I know it's ugly, but I love it. But your thoughts? in the crowded as we become more distracted on our phones
Well,
and TikTok, and as the college football is growing, soccer's bigger globally. Where is NBA? Are you concerned at all about the NBA and the European growth and the domestic players shrinking?
I don't. So to me, these are almost separate. So right now, first team All NBA
Yeah,
would be 5 international guys.
right.
It'd be Luka and Shea as the guards, and
Yeah,
Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid as your bigs. That would
yep.
be that. And right now, that would be your first team All NBA. That would be your top 5, probably MVP ballot. Tyrese
Yeah,
Halliburton would
yeah.
probably be next up. And right, because of what's happened with Ja, I I don't know who this wasn't my initial idea. I read a tweet or heard a podcast. Sometimes I get a little self-conscious sometimes, like I don't want to take someone's idea,
Sure.
but I also consume so much stuff, like I don't know
Same.
where I first heard
Same.
it. Like, and
Yeah.
so somebody posited the idea, is Anthony Davis the best American player? And I stopped and I was at first I'm like, no, and then I thought about it and I'm like,
Defensively, yes.
well, like, is it between he and Tatum?
Yes.
And if
Yes.
that's right, and if that's where we're at, that is a problem. That's not an indictment. I'm not, those guys are great players, but nobody thinks either one of them is in the discussion for best player in the league. And
Right.
so, and if we were to talk about if we were to make a list of the 8 best international players and the 8 best American players, the other problem would be this: 3 of the 8 Americans, maybe 4 of the 8 Americans, now I think about it, are old guys.
Steph, LeBron,
KD, and Jimmy Butler. Those are, you know what I mean? Jimmy's the youngest of the group. And so that is, it's not like the NBA is not going to have enough talent, because it is such an international game and you're getting more and more guys from overseas. But like there is I think, and by the way, when we're talking about the best American players, the guy I left out who's ascending there and would be the hope because of his age is Anthony Edwards.
yes.
Like, could Anthony Edwards get there where we're talking about? But from a pure strategic or popularity standpoint, I don't think it's great for the league if I think it's really good for the league if some of the best players are international players. I don't think it's great for the league if all of the best players are international players. And so, and obviously people believe Wemby is going to be on that track. Now that's to me less about like the international game and more about the fact the guy's 7'5", you know what I mean? And is skilled. And so I don't know the answer as to why. I think AAU too often gets used as a boogeyman. You know, my son played high level amateur basketball. He had really good experiences with it. The kid who I think is a really nice role player for the Knicks, I've talked to you about this, Quentin Grimes.
Yeah.
He was my son's teammate one summer. Those practices were good. That was a good team. They were good kids. So I think sometimes AAU basketball gets a bad name, but there is something going on where there is a different stylistic, approach to basketball from Şengün is clearly like an international style of player. Now, he's not a star, but he might be an all-star this year. And so I don't know the answer. And it does also feel like Shea almost should count as an American. Like, he's not, you know what I mean? He's from Canada. It's just
Like
kind of
Steve
bad
Nash.
luck. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I don't know what the solution. I don't know if there is a solution. I don't know what the answer to it is, but it's undeniable that it's trending in that direction. And it happened fast.
Yeah.
20 years ago, European player meant soft. And it was like, wow, Dirk.
No question.
It was like
Tony Kukoc.
100%. And it was basically, okay, aside from Akeem Olajuwon, who, by the way, went to college in America, you know what I mean? Had an American experience. Aside from him, if your best player is an international guy, you got no shot whatsoever. And it switched really fast. Really, really fast. I mean, 10 years ago, it was just Dirk and Akeem as far as the like no doubt all-time legends.
And Dirk was considered kind of a soft offensive only player.
Yep, exactly right. And so it changed fast on us. And I'm not sure. Somebody should, and maybe somebody has, and I just haven't read it. Either written, this is like a Daryl Morey Sloan conference type of paper, or maybe a book. Yeah. Because the other thing is this, the international guys, again, aside from Shea, who's Canadian, but the European stars, they're all 6'8" or taller. It's big, skilled guys. Luka's a guard, but he's big. We're not getting a bunch of like 6'2" wizards with the basketball from Europe. It's all like Giannis is this point forward, Embiid, Jokic was such a unique player. So I don't know what it is, but it's clearly happening. For good or for bad, it's happening.
Yeah, and let's just acknowledge that 18 months from now, Wemby will be in that discussion. So
absolutely.
It's not stopping. So I was thinking about this, and I want to continue on with the NBA. And I have said this, is that people show you who they are very early. One of the things when I started the volume, I said, be careful about hiring people that could be difficult to fire. Meaning they're temperamental, they are grudge holding, they're petty, they're on Twitter for the wrong reasons.
We'll try to burn you down on the way out the door.
So we've had 3 or 4 people that we have discussed hiring, and I said, what if you had to let that person go? They didn't drive revenue, they were difficult. I said, be careful about that. So people show you who they are very early. And very early in Jayson Tatum's career, I like him a lot. I don't love him. I like him a lot. But very early in his career, he showed you something that Michael never illustrated, Kobe didn't, LeBron didn't, D-Wade didn't, is that he lacked confidence in big spots. You almost had to push him into taking shots. Is that in these big fourth quarter moments, his second, third, fourth year, we were all like, oh, love his body, can put it on the floor, good teammate, plays real defense, can kind of let Jaylen Brown take control. Sometimes Marcus Smart.
Let Marcus Smart,
a defensive player,
turn into the pseudo alpha. Yep.
And I watch the Celtics, and I still don't trust him years later. He is at least 60, 70%. It's his game. But there are moments still with Jayson Tatum. This is never a Luka issue. It's not a Giannis issue.
No, and it's weird. I mean, this is spot on.
Am I wrong?
By the way, and it's a weird thing to say because he had 50 in a Game 7. We saw him have that amazing Game 6 against Giannis a few years ago.
Yeah.
So it's in there. We saw him as a rookie dunk on LeBron and seem fully confident. Peak 2018 LeBron. We've seen all these things. And Celtics fans will get very, parochial and territorial and defensive. But I think deep down, everybody knows that the Celtics, it's not they can't win the title, but they have to win the title like the 04 Pistons, meaning it's got to be a collective effort.
Yep.
And that is the hardest title to win. The reason we always go to the 04 Pistons is because every other champion from 1980 to now has had a top 20 all-time player. So it's not like an indictment to say Tatum's not that, because it's only been like 16 guys in 40 years. To be the best player on a champion, the only other guy other than the 04 Pistons, you would say, is Kawhi's championships, but he was a guy who was trending towards that, and injuries kind of undercut the player he was going to be. Every other team, literally, had a legend. And I don't think anyone looks at Jayson Tatum and says he's going to be a legend.
That's right.
We say his ceiling is MVP candidate.
Yeah.
All the other guys, the ceiling was how many MVPs.
Okay.
And that's the difference.
Okay, so I threw this out last week. It's my favorite comp I think I've ever done in the last year.
Wow.
Andy Murray, tennis player, Great Britain. So there's Federer is better than him. And he's like, okay. And then Federer's getting old. And then Federer's past his prime. And Andy Murray has this little window. Oh, crap. Here comes the Joker. And his window was about a year. Okay. Okay. Tatum, LeBron, Steph, he just doesn't have that savvy, that game. It's like, he's so close. And he gets a little window, finals against the Warriors, doesn't win. And here comes Jokic and Luka and Giannis. He's the Andy Murray of the NBA. That his window was a sliver. He was there at home, and
it's that close.
And
the margins are that
beat
close.
him in the final set.
And it's just like, okay, that right. And that might be it. And so that's why I give the Celtics credit, because they have built a team that, if healthy, is so well-rounded and has so many top 50 players on it, of today's game. You know what I mean? Like their worst starter is still a really good player.
Yes.
You have Derek White, Drew Holiday, Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis.
Excellent starting five.
It's a great starting five. They are banking on that. Again, that's the 04 Pistons. The 04 Pistons, you have Rip Hamilton, you have Tayshaun Prince, you have Rasheed Wallace, you have Ben Wallace, you have Chauncey Billups.
Yeah.
Those are 5 excellent players, but nobody that is, holy shit.
Yeah.
And that's where, and I think Tatum's probably right now better than any of those 5 guys
yeah,
were
so do
in
I.
that moment. But that's just the truth. That's why the NBA is so unique. Like and I want to make it clear to the audience, when I say 1980 to now, like, and I'll just do the my own personal, off the top of my head rankings. I did that list, the 50 best players the last 50 years. So Kareem to now. And if you go through the champions from 80 to now, you have the Lakers, who had Kareem and Magic, who are 2 and 4. You had the Sixers, who had Dr. J and Moses, who are 12 and 13. You had the Celtics, who had Larry Bird, who's 7 or 8. You had the Pistons, who had Isaiah, who's right around 15. And then you had the Bulls, who had MJ, the Rockets, who had Akeem, and then the Spurs, who have Tim Duncan, the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, the 04 Pistons, and then you have the Heat, who have D. Wade, who's right on the fringes, but Shaq, who's firmly in it. Obviously, then the Lakers again with just Kobe. And then, the other team, it's funny, I left this out. The other team they're trying to be like is the 08 Celtics, who, again, they had Garnett, Garnett's better than Tatum, but he was, but it's the same type of thing. So I shouldn't have left them out, but Garnett's on the fringes of it. And then since then, we know who it is. It's LeBron, it's Steph, it's Dirk, who's right there. It's Giannis, it's Jokic, it's Durant, it's Kawhi. And it's not an indictment. And this was why I didn't believe in the Nuggets, because it was the same math. I just underrated Jokic.
Right.
The math was, okay, Jokic is really good. He's not a legend. And I was wrong. It's like, shit, he's pretty legendary. He's pretty great. And so I guess maybe it's self-fulfilling in that if the Celtics get there, we'll look at Tatum like that. But I don't think we will. If the Celtics get there, I think it'll be like, wow, that was an awesome team they put together. And so it is why it's hard to – it's also why the Heat haven't gotten quite over the hump. Because the Heat have tried the same thing. They've got an awesome player in Jimmy, an awesome starting 5, a much better coach than Boston has, obviously. But it's so hard. When you get in the finals for the Heat, when they've done it, you got in the finals, you got your team, all of it, and LeBron is sitting there. And even old-ass LeBron was like, for 2 weeks, I can kick your ass. Then you get in the finals again, and Jokic is like, yeah, I can kick your ass too. It's just hard when that guy's on the other side. And for the Celtics, what's going to be the tough thing is this, and the NBA doesn't always come down to this, but man, it's hard to overcome in one series, much less 3 in a row. I would argue the Celtics, to win a title, are probably going to have to win 3 consecutive series, the second round, the conference finals, and the finals, where the best player on the court's on the other team.
Yep.
That's fucking hard, man. You know what I mean? Like, because Embiid in the playoffs isn't the same, but still, Giannis, any of those guys, Jimmy Butler has proven in the playoffs, and then whoever you face off in the finals, that you might have the better 2, 3, 4, 5, but the best player is going to be on the other team. It's going to be hard.
An hour 20 was good. Listen, you sit in the snow. I got 62 degrees.
Yeah, exactly.
A shrimp salad.
unbelievable. A shrimp salad. Oh my goodness. Tell your wonderful wife I say hello. And I hope to see you in Los Angeles again soon. I gotta find a way, because I still believe the Chiefs are gonna go to the Super Bowl. I gotta find a way to go to the Super Bowl when the Chiefs are there going for back-to-back. And if that happens, maybe I can do my show from Los Angeles and I'll get to see you. But it's always great to talk to you. I'll talk to you soon.
I'd write that in pencil, not pen.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.